Oh, and welcome to DSR Daily, known to its friends as the DSR Daily Doom Scroll, because we go and we look at all the stories coming across the transom and try to figure out which ones may be important. And we talk about it for a little bit, not too long. You'll be out of here in no time at all. Trust me. I'm David Rothkopf. I'm one of your hosts, joined by Riley Fessler, another host. How you doing, Riley?
Pretty
And of
good.
course, no one would be here if it were not for Minna Stein, our third host. How are you doing, Minna?
I'm feeling spectacular.
Spectacular. Well, that's great because you didn't get your COVID shot yesterday like I did, and your
Yes.
flu shot. And I'm like, oh, I'm healthy. And then I'm like, oh, no, I don't feel so good. But we will motor through this because everybody out there is waiting to hear our takes on what's going on. Start us off, Minna.
Philadelphia will be the focal point when Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump face off in a high-stakes televised debate on ABC News. Scheduled for 9 p.m. tonight, the debate is expected to draw significant attention, with police preparing for protests with barricades set up around the National Constitution Center. Local bars and universities are planning watch parties, while top Democrats will gather for a post-debate event with Harris. The debate is crucial for Harris, who has been gaining momentum and fundraising success as she faces a tight race against Trump in the battleground state of Pennsylvania.
Okay, let's start with the most mundane aspect of this. 9 o'clock, really? Like, why do we do that? No, why does
That's what we were talking about before.
Why does
Yeah.
the East Coast have to suffer because the West Coast has located itself in the wrong place? I mean, 9 o'clock means it won't be over till 10:30 or 11. Those of us who have to write something about it will then be up writing for another hour or 90 minutes afterwards. This is all because a bunch of people, they needed more sun or something like that, and so they go live in some crazy place like California. I don't understand it. Okay, that's my protest on that point. But
the debate's getting protested from all angles.
Well, yeah, but usually, typically at this point we go, well, the debate probably won't mean a thing because they don't. Problem is that the last debate changed everything. So it's kind of hard to say to people who sat through the car wreck that happened in June, oh yeah, this probably won't mean anything because it could mean something. Presumably, you're going to watch party Minna.
Obviously,
a debate,
of course I am.
Kegger.
Yeah.
And
you know me.
No, I know. Whereas Riley will be home doing a puzzle.
You know me so well.
Exactly. Well, we'll discuss it here tomorrow. I expect Kamala Harris to do pretty well. I expect Donald Trump not to do well. And here's a shocker. I expect the Trump-oriented media to say he did great. And I expect the Harris-oriented media to say she did great. So maybe I can save you staying up that late, but we'll see. What do you got, Riley?
Overnight, over 140 Ukrainian drones launched a large-scale attack on multiple Russian regions, including Moscow and its surroundings, killing at least one person and injuring several others. Just outside Moscow, a woman died and fires broke out after drones struck residential buildings. As a result, 5 buildings were evacuated and 3 major airports near Moscow were temporarily closed, with 48 flights being diverted. This was one of the largest drone attacks on Russian soil since the start of the war, and it follows a similarly massive assault earlier this month. While Russia continues to launch missile and drone strikes on Ukraine, killing over 10,000 civilians, Ukraine has intensified its use of drones to disrupt Russian operations.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, do these things have a strategic benefit for Ukraine? They may lift morale a little bit. They may dampen Russian morale a little bit, but do they actually make the Russians fight harder, or does it make more Russians say, "Hey, let's stop before this gets even worse"? I don't think anybody knows at this point. I think the reason these drone attacks go on is because they're relatively cheap. The drones are cheap. You can go and launch them in. They can go and have some effect. It appears, in my view, to be more than it is. Riley?
Oh, it's Minno's turn.
Sorry.
Recent polling is presenting challenges for Vice President Kamala Harris ahead of her crucial debate with Donald Trump, with a New York Times/Siena poll showing Trump leading by 1 point nationally. The poll indicates a tight race in key battleground states and highlights that many voters know less about Harris compared to Trump, suggesting she has more to gain from the debate. Despite the pressure, Democrats view the debate as a chance for Harris to boost her standing and energize her base, especially as she faces criticism for her progressive stances and campaign decisions.
Okay, let me see how fast I can say this. In the past couple of years, polling results have all been wrong. They've been wrong for several reasons. One of them is that they're working off of old lists and new people are voting. In fact, polling is skewed against candidates who actually motivate new voters to get out and vote. Secondly, a lot of the polling is done via cell phones. Now, let's just take an average poll. I'll just do a poll right here, right now on this show. Minna, if you get a phone call from a cell phone number that you don't recognize, do you answer it?
Yes, but the answer for most people is no.
You are so strange. I'm sorry I started.
I'm excited in election years about being asked about my vote,
but you
and
don't
so I
know
answer.
that it's your vote. It could say spam risk on it. You don't.
Well, if it says spam risk, I'm not going to answer it. But
I, as a normal person, don't answer my phone if I don't know.
I'm so glad there are at least two normal people on this podcast. Of course, nobody answers it. Who answers cell phone? I don't answer cell phone calls if it says it's my sister. I mean, it's like, why can't you text? I don't need to have a phone call. Who needs cold calling in the middle of the day? But anyway, the point is, this skews the results. Also, a lot of these polls talk about registered voters. Registered voters don't matter. What matters is the voters who actually show up. Motivated voters matters. Well, what's all the data say about motivated voters? Well, most of the volunteers that have signed on recently have been Harris volunteers. Who has raised money? Harris raised almost 3 times as much money as Trump has over the course of the period since she's become the candidate. When you look at polls that drill down on likely voters in key groups, women, young people, people of color, et cetera, she has a big lead. So I think there's something screwy in these things. I think this New York Times poll looks weird to me, as do some of the other nonsense things like Nate Silver going, well, here's our poly market poll of what people think might happen. And it's like, it's a poll about what people think is going to happen. I mean, that's like a double negative. That's ridiculous. It has no value whatsoever. And the fact that Nate Silver, took a big investment from Peter Thiel, who is totally involved with Elon Musk and Donald Trump on the right, ought to raise some questions in the minds of people. Also, the fact that he was profoundly wrong in 2022. But look, you may think this sounds defensive. I'm just trying to help you learn to avoid being suckered by polls, to think they mean more than they do, to getting bummed out by polls, to getting euphoric by polls. You got to take all of this with a degree of sort of informed awareness. And we're going to focus a couple podcasts later this week on just that subject. When we talk to some people who say, what are the concrete things that you can look at that really make a difference, like voter registrations or early voting and so on and so forth. What's our next story?
At least 13 people were killed in an Israeli airstrike in the designated humanitarian zone in southern Gaza, according to a local hospital. The strike hit a tented camp in al-Mawasi, where many displaced Palestinians had taken refuge. Israel's military claimed it targeted senior Hamas leaders operating in the area, including figures from Hamas's aerial and intelligence units, while Hamas denied their presence and condemned the attack as a massacre. The strike left significant destruction, with eyewitnesses describing deep craters and buried tents. Gaza's civil defense reported over 40 fatalities, though Israel disputed the initial death toll.
Um, you know, this is just a cycle of pain that continues to go on. You would think that people shouldn't be attacking humanitarian zones because they're called humanitarian zones for a reason. Now, of course, do some people take advantage of that and hide out in those places? Yes. But what takes precedence? What takes precedence in these cases? For the Israelis, always going after potential targets, regardless of the potential collateral damage, seems to be the approach. It has cost them enormously. It's cost the people of Palestinian territories enormously, and it's not sustainable. I've seen recently, some people saying, Kamala Harris needs to break with Biden on this and take a much stronger point of view. Um, uh, I think, I certainly wouldn't object to that, but here's the reality: that the influence that the United States has over Israel is not what people think it is, and that if we stopped providing them with weapons, I'm not sure it would change their behavior. The reason to not provide them with weapons, therefore, is not to change their behavior, which it wouldn't do. It's to not be complicit in the murder of Palestinians. And I think that's a perfectly good reason for the United States to stop providing weapons to Israel until its policies change. Parenthetically, that probably means until its leadership changes. Next.
Ginny Thomas, wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, has come under scrutiny for an email praising First Liberty Institute, a conservative group with a case before the court. Critics, including Senator Judiciary Committee Chairman Dick Durbin, argues that this suggests potential bias and are calling for Justice Thomas to recuse himself from related cases. This controversy feeds into broader debates over Supreme Court ethics and the need for reforms. Despite Justice Thomas signing an ethics code in 2023, it does not cover spouses, leaving the issue unresolved.
Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Indefensible. Of course, there should be an ethics code. Justice Jackson was talking about this the other day. Every other judge has it. Why shouldn't the Supreme Court? There are ways to make it work. They just don't want to make it work. They have abused their position time and again. Ginny Thomas is very likely to have played a kind of co-conspirator role in January 6th. She has been meddling, using her husband's position. He's been using it to enrich himself. He doesn't belong on the court. She doesn't belong on the court. They actually should be prosecuted. The same probably is true for Alito. And won't happen. Won't happen. The Supreme Court is tainted until, maybe if Democrats win the Senate and the presidency and they suspend filibuster rules in a number of ways, and they force through ethics reform, and they put 2 or 3 new people on the court, or even expand the court if they need to. That's the only way to fix this. And it is a point of crisis where this ought to be something we really talk about. People are sort of, dreaming if they think it's going to somehow fix itself. Alito. They say, well, Alito and Thomas are in their 70s. They'll step down soon. I don't pay attention to actuarial tables. Healthy adults in their 70s live until their 80s or 90s. And they have not once done anything that is public spirited. It has all been to serve their narrow self-interest. I wouldn't expect them to sort of change their spots at this point. Well, tonight we'll all be up there watching the debate, except for Riley, who'll be doing a puzzle. And then tomorrow morning we will talk about it here. If it doesn't really mean anything, we'll make sure to point that out and move on to another story really quickly. That's the advantage of us covering 5 or 6 stories every day. But for now, enjoy it. Enjoy your watch parties. Enjoy shouting at the television set, as all of us do, with the ridiculous commentaries of some of the horrible commentators that exist on virtually every network. And have a good day. And then we'll see you tomorrow. Bye, Riley. Bye, Minna. Bye, everybody.